Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in Miniatures, and boy do I have a fun set of models to show off today. Now, I keep my eye on a ton, and I mean a ton. You should see just the amount of links I've got all over my computer and notes that I have taking next to it for various Patreons, Kickstarters, artists, ArtStation, Gumroad, comics, games, and I follow a ton of people because I've been doing this for a little while now, and I like to see what's out there, and sometimes things just really get my attention. I'm very particular about things and styles that I like, and one particular group that really is always in my radar is Dragon Trappers Lodge, and you've probably seen quite a few of their painted models and unpainted models on this channel before, but nothing has really grabbed me as much as their most recent release, their Big Dragons War, where they took a whole one-page rule style army, which they actually have rules for if you guys want to check those out, and they went and made full-on dragonborn pseudo World War II, I think it's more World War I, but an actual integrated army of all of the various types of troops that you will need based on dragon type people. This being one of the generic close combat guys with a bit of fuzz from the sweater I was wearing stuck on his arm there on a nice simple 25mm base. One thing to be aware of, and I believe I've probably mentioned this in their videos before, Dragon Trappers Lodge often have little plugs on their bases. If I can get that focused, there we go, to attach their characters to, but with a quick little clip of some clippers, you can mount these guys on just about anything. So in addition to our actual dragonborn being the core of our army, we also have a fair amount of kobolds. And there we go. In uniform, no less. And you can see here, I haven't actually clipped his little plugs on the bottom of his feet. I just stuck them in the slot base, and he worked out quite well. I want to say this is one of the heroes, and yeah, I know I need to do a little bit more cleanup there. And an interesting thing was that almost all of the kobolds and ranged guys had an option between actual machine guns or crossbows. So if you wanted something more traditional, that was an option. Now, this fellow right here was just like their kind of Highlander, typical grunt type guy. Was not the first model I actually saw or printed. That would be their big artilleryman, of which they had a couple of different poses. Now, the cannon to me is a little low-tech for World War II, but I'll allow it. We're going to follow the rule of cool here. I saw this, I was like, well, you know what? A Gatling gun or something would probably be more effective for what these kind of guys would carry. He is the same size as the rest of the Dragonborn, with an exception, which we'll show off in a little bit. We'll get some humans to give you guys an idea. Dragon Trappers Lodge usually have pretty reasonably scaled humanoid models. They're not too big, not too small, and often are a bit more true scale in their sculpts and size of weapons, obviously with the exception of our Dragonborn with the sword there. And again, another of the options. The firing effect is part of the gun when you print it. Personally, I'm not a fan, but it's an easy to clip off little function. If you wanted to just have a regular, plain, generic gun primed and aimed, that is something you can do. Here are those little pegs I was mentioning. And again, the feet are flat enough that if you just wanted to go ahead and put them on a regular base, that would not be an issue. Of course, these are just the standard sized ones, with the exception being there are female sharpshooters, which I thought was a cool touch. Again, the guns are a mix of that kind of low-tech Magitech style, so while it may not be as high-tech as actual World War II stuff, depending upon how you painted it, I don't see that being a big issue, and the fact that you can have a whole army of these figures is a pretty cool touch. And this guy does not want to keep his balance right now before I glue him on, so we'll just set him to the side. So those are like the basic troops. I want to say I had a few more kobolds, and I don't know where I put them now. One that I thought did bear mentioning were the kobold paratroopers, which I thought were just fun sculpts. I have another one somewhere, but this is the one that I wanted to show off with the grenade in his mouth as he's firing his gun. You can see here they have a slot for a peg, and then they attach to the base. I don't know where I put his base. Maybe that's why. But there's a whole unit of these guys as well. In addition to all of the various units, I thought what was kind of cool was we have scenery as well. And for as long as I've been into tabletop games, I don't have much in the way of scenery of this type. You know, good old generic sandbags, craters, explosions, and they come in all sorts of various sizes and shapes. So that is a nice little handy piece to have. Let's get to some of the heroes. Okay, one of the ones that I thought was one of the coolest models of this set was the medic. I didn't think I'd say that, but I thought he looked really neat with his whole little satchel there. Kind of surprised he didn't have a red cross on his shield as well. Flight looking jacket there. I think he's going to be a fun one to paint. And I'll be honest, he's probably going to be also the first one I paint. Not sure if that's his base or not, but we're going to put him on it. Let's see. One of the other hero characters we got with this cool, crazy base was the Fumigator, which was a female gas mage, I guess, for lack of a better term. I haven't looked at the rules yet. I did download them. Got to double check them, and she fits in like that. Very Mysterio-ish. And we'll come back to these figures in a moment. There's some more we're going to show off with them. And just because we had to have a fun kobold sculpt, going all Dr. Strangelove style here as he rides off on his bomb with a rocket launcher. So while they are a little silly, it seems pretty typical for kobolds. I'll allow it. Now, and then we had a set of flying, or basically hovering, worm-blooded draconian type heroes. Now he's wearing a bit more ornate armor. I like the little tassels on his lapels there, along with his typical uniform. Again, he's got a spot here that is going to attach to a plug so he can kind of float above the rest on his 25mm base. And if you've been following Dragon Trapper's Lodge long enough, you know that they've been doing glow hoppers, which were their kind of weird, funky, bipedal bird creatures they put up quite a few months ago. We have a draconian glow hopper this time around. So every month in the past few months, they've had kind of a glow hopper of the month. So that was a cool little touch. Now, in addition to all this stuff, it wouldn't be an army if you didn't have, your typical mobile units of some sort or vehicles. So we do actually have some vehicles in a certain manner. We've got cavalry. And there were a couple different cavalry models available. We had a couple different versions, this one being obviously a more heavily armed one. You can see he's got all his little kit and caboodle all set up there, along with his stirrups and his saddle. There were saddleless options, and unfortunately he had all kinds of arrows stuck on his base, and there are only 3 left standing at this point. Everything attaches pretty well to the base, and what was really cool, I thought, was how they worked out all of the various saddles, which we're going to come back to in a moment as well. We had generic draconian dragonborn type riders, but we also had hero versions, or I should say mounted versions, of all of the heroes, so you can have them both mounted and on foot. I thought that was a really cool touch. So obviously here's the medic. I want to say that the generic dragonborn guys had like lances or something, or swords maybe. The mage. kobold. I don't know how he's going to reach those stirrups, but we'll let him figure that out. But again, just a really cool idea. And so those would be, you know, your ground attack. There's also, well, it's supposed to be a dragon's war, right? What kind of war for dragons, with dragons, is it going to be if you don't have any dragons? Well, here's some really cool things. We've got fully modular dragons. So we have a basic body that all the dragons are going to basically go along with. And of course, much like the cavalry, you have options for either no webbing on there, no gear, no saddle. Now, I opted for a dual saddle on this one. You'll see there's a pair of legs, and that's for the quite literal tail gunner. Now, there's options for the weapons. You don't have to have a tail gunner there, but you can. And again, what's neat is if you printed any of the mounted heroes for the cavalry, it's the exact same size saddle. So you can, I guess if you want to get really ambitious, magnetize them on both ends. And you can use them. Now, unfortunately, like we got to get kind of creative getting everybody situated there. Now, when I say modular, I do mean modular. There were at least 3 different heads for the dragons, 3 different sets of wings, and 3 different tails. So the variety that you can come up with is quite nice. They're not the biggest dragons, but I think that actually works to their advantage. If you've ever seen my Incandriox from Dragon Trapper's Lodge that I painted up, that thing is absolutely massive. And I mean, wow, they continue to put out some big, impressive monsters like that. This guy's pretty reasonably sized. But the fact that you can make a whole modular air force of them, ooh, those are the parts for his base. I guess if you had translucent resin, that might work out better. Big hole in the belly where everything fits in. Nice and snugly. Obviously, you would probably want to actually glue that down. I'm not 100% sure which direction it's supposed to be yet, but that's just me having to play around with it. Here are the plugs for the wings. Like I said, there are 3 different versions of the wings at various angles of, you know, where he's going to be flying. Good sized wingspan. But then we have these extra little plugs on the webbing, which is kind of cool because, again, even more options. You can have Gatling guns on both ends. You could have bombs. And this might be for the opposite side, but that's okay. Or you can even have, I guess I'll just do it like that. Your medic gear. I think it would have been cool just to have like some generic pouches. Maybe there were and I can't remember. But just the fact that we have all those options available, I think is really cool. And there are a couple other dragons that I haven't even gotten around to yet. The Siege Dragon being the one I'm most interested in that I haven't printed yet. But I've got so much here that I need to really get started with. So I'm probably going to hold off a little bit on those. See, I'm carrying the bombs there. I think just, you know, I like the fact that we've got so many basic options covered here that, you know, you could really do a lot with it. And the fact that they partnered with one-page rules and you've got actual, you know, wargaming / skirmish rules for all this, I think is really cool. So if you're interested, you know, absolutely, by all means, I would strongly recommend checking their stuff out if you've never seen Dragon Trapper's Lodge and their stuff before. All right, grabbing a couple random figures. We've got a Manta human, a semi-modern plastic human, a Primaris, a Frostgrave guy, and a GW human. So you can see he's not overtly gigantic. I think he's actually pretty well scaled with all the other human models. Grabbing a couple other random humans. We've got handy a Wargames Atlantic Bulldog. Let's see if I can find a WizKids model around here. There we go. I mean, he's got a good bulk to him. He's not overly big, like I said. I think he's going to fit in quite nicely, and that's before I did any kind of tweaking whatsoever with the scale. Personally, I like my dragonborn really big. I probably would want to go back and print some of these, maybe like 125, 150%, just to give them that extra oomph. Put them on a 32 millimeter base at that point. I think they would look really impressive, at least with the Annihilator, Obliterator types, being that they're the heavy weapon dudes. I think with the regular generic infantry guys, I think they're great at the current scale. And again, that's just more my personal preference. I want big, bulky guys with the heavy weapons. And the kobolds, I think, are just perfect. Perfect as is. You know, they come up to about the waist. It's about where they should. Let's see if I have a more modern GW guy. If it makes a difference. I mean, they're about right in there. So outside of, like, overtly large figures, I think these are going to look really good. And they should scale pretty well with a lot of the other Dragon Trappers Lodge. All these years, I still can't get it right. My God. But yeah, a really fun release. I mean, I even printed out scenery stuff. That is a rarity. So the question for me now is, who exactly are they fighting? I know they did some polls for new releases coming up, and I was hoping beyond hope we were going to get the Oni set. Hopefully we're going to see them in the future. I already mentioned I was going to have to do my part to, because, I mean, come on, they would have had a mobile kaiju lodge base on the back of that thing. That would have been really cool to see. Hopefully we still see it. I think that was for their February Patreon release. I could be wrong. Anyway, I'm rambling at this point. I am eager to get this stuff painted, so I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to put a link down below. If you haven't seen these, do take a look. There are tons of fun models. Every month has had just a really nice selection. I mean, they've really upped their game, I'd say, in the last year. It's kind of cool seeing them start from such humble beginnings. Just a couple handful of models every month. You know, it was like a dragon, a hero, a support guy, and now we've got full-blown armies. I mean, we've really seen a lot of progress, and that's always cool to see for everybody in this hobby. I always like seeing people grow and get the credit that they deserve. So kudos to Dragon Trappers Lodge for yet another wonderful release. And hopefully you guys are going to enjoy it just as much as I do. So, with that said, this has been High Lord Tamberlane with Obscurities and Miniatures, saying thanks for watching, and we will see you back here soon. Bye-bye.